So on this Friday, Korean forces carried out a drill aimed at repelling foreign landings on the Korea-controlled Tokto islets. The drill, which included destroyers and combat jets, took place on what Korea has designated as Tokto Day.
While not an official holiday, the appellation is meant to mark the day in 1900 when history says Emperor Gojong asserted dominion over the rocks. This comes as tensions are flaring between Seoul and Tokyo over Japan's recent posting of a YouTube video that asserts its sovereignty over Tokto.
So what kind of a message do today's drills convey, and how can we interpret the latest moves by Japan claiming ownership over the islets?
Well, joining us live in the studio to give us some perspective and forecast of Korea-Japan relations is Dr. Bong Young-sik, Senior Research Fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Bong, thank you for making time for us today.
Good evening.
So the Korean military staged defense drills in the waters around the Tokto islets today, involving naval destroyers, helicopters, and F-15K combat jets. Now, although the drills, the Navy and the Coast Guards have said that have been held previously, this is the very first time that the Navy's underwater demolition team carried out the drills or took part in it with UH-60 helicopters. Now, and plus it comes at a sensitive time. So could you put all of this into perspective for us?
Mobilizing military forces in attempts to augment the sovereignty of Korea over the Tokto islets is quite understandable from the perspective of patriotism and domestic politics. But from the standpoint of third parties who are not properly informed about all the central information about the historical and legal backgrounds of the issue, may take it in a wrong way, as if South Korea might have something to hide, or Japan's claim of its sovereign rights over the Tokto islet have more reasons to be accepted than South Korea's, because it has been consistent position of South Korea that there is no dispute to be resolved in the first place, because according to international law and history, there is no doubt that Tokto belongs to Korea as a sovereign territory. Then the third-party observers may question why South Korea would need to mobilize armed forces when in the name of protecting the territory that has been under its administration for more than 60 years. If there's no dispute to be resolved, say in the hands of the International Court of Justice, then why South Korean government has endorsed the military exercises that would make the issue as a dispute between two sovereign countries. So you got to be really careful in balancing what you need to do for domestic consumption and what you need to do in order to facilitate your public relations campaigns toward the outsiders.
Right, the show of force might be reflected by outsiders as a show of insecurity in some sense. Well, Japan started a very effective campaign to aggravate Korea with the YouTube video clips claiming that they own Tokto islets. Well, we tried to tell them to stop, but they flatly turned it down. That really ultimately led to the response they have right now. Is this part of the Abe administration's far-right policy, in your opinion?
It has been very frustrating and disappointing to the South Korean government, who wishes to incorporate Japan's support and cooperation to build more peaceful and stable Northeast Asia, as proclaimed in Park Geun-hye government's policy of Trustpolitik. Abe administration does not really have a great deal of political autonomy or conviction that showing deference to South Korea's position with regard to unresolved territorial and historical issues would be essential for Japan to be welcomed as an important and responsible country in the region. To disappointment for neighboring countries such as South Korea and China, it seems like Abe administration has chosen to revert to the old slogans reminiscent of the colonial past of Imperial Japan, which is very disappointing, because neighboring countries would welcome Japan, especially its economy, to rise up again after more than 25 years of stagnation. It is quite understandable that Japanese leadership would some very visible and powerful slogan or vision to galvanize the public to move toward a more prosperous and proud future. But choosing the old, rather outdated and dangerous slogans from the imperial past, that's very concerning to South Korea and China.
Well, one thing that's clear is that it's definitely not helping in improving relations between the two countries. In fact, it's only souring the already tense relations between the two. I mean, it's quite clear when we see President Park Geun-hye already 10 months in office hasn't held a bilateral summit with Prime Minister Abe. Now, knowing this, why is Japan going ahead and creating more tension?
There are several factors accountable for this inaction or adamant position of Abe administration. One is an internal issue that it seems like the Abe administration and its conservative power basis seems to have a kind of apology fatigue, that it's a sense of resignation that no matter how apologetic Japan would be toward neighboring countries for the sake of moving toward a brighter future together, then South Korea and China would not properly or proactively respond to quote-unquote good gesture. So there's a need or incentive for Abe administration to assume proactive and open-minded attitude toward neighboring countries with regard to these issues. Rather, it would just focus on consolidating its conservative power basis. And another point is the lack of adequate strategic vision and the growing doubt about U.S. capacity and intentions to fulfill its policy of rebalancing toward Asia. Without clear demonstration of its strong will to remain as a staying power in Northeast Asia for regional stability, then countries like South Korea would be extremely concerned about U.S. Seemingly just giving free hands to Japan to enlarge its military role in regional security. So unless the United States would begin to send clear signals that it is committed to balancing the security needs in carrying out the vision of rebalancing toward Asia, and the incorporating the deep-seated and long concern of its Asian allies about Japan relapsing into the imperial militarism, then countries like South Korea has a legitimate reason to be concerned about Japan, moving toward, to the vision of quote-unquote normal in a country.
Okay. Well, from here on, what would you suggest the Park Geun-hye administration do to perhaps improve the already soured Korea-Japan relations?
Well, it's a Friday evening, so I'd like to end with a bright note. And the first step would be, rather than seeing the whole picture of Korea-Japan relationship, which has been extremely stagnant and hostile, we need to think about what kind of a very small but specific issues that can be resolved by both governments. I was really encouraged by the news on today's newspaper that the local court of Osaka just ruled that it is unlawful to not to provide health benefits to the Hibakuja, the victims of the atomic bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, who are not Japanese citizens. There are still about 2,000 to 2,500 the Hibakuja of the Korean origins who have not been eligible to get the benefits from the Japanese government. And Japan has been known as the only country in the world history that suffered from the atomic bombing. So if Japanese government make a proactive action in fulfillment of this recent court ruling to embrace the victims of all nationalities, then that could be a good sign that can be easily embraced by the Park Geun-hye government of South Korea.
Right. I remember back in early 2011 when I was visiting that area, they were hibakusha of Korean origin. We're still fighting for that. So that's definitely a brighter note that you have finished for us this Friday evening. Dr. Bo Myung-sik, Senior Research Fellow at the Asan Institute. Thank you so much for speaking with us this evening.
Thank you.